The emergency broadcast reached every human settlement in the outer colonies at the same time. Ambassador David Wright read the message 3 times before he believed what he was seeing. The Galactic Council had voted. Humanity was banned from all nature worlds. No exceptions. No appeals. Immediate evacuation required. David sat in his small office on the diplomatic station and wondered how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Just 6 months ago, humanity had been celebrated as the newest members of the galactic community. Now they were being treated like criminals. His assistant Roger knocked and entered without waiting for permission. His face was pale and worried. He carried a stack of datapads that he dropped onto the desk with a heavy thud. The official charges are listed here. 17 protocol violations, 23 quarantine breaches, and something about inappropriate interaction with protected species. Roger's voice shook slightly. David, what did our people do out there? David picked up the first datapad and started reading. The charges were technical and dry, but one phrase kept repeating. Unauthorized emotional attachment to xenofauna. Failure to maintain scientific distance. Inappropriate socialization with dangerous predators. They made friends, David said quietly. That's what they did. They made friends with creatures that everyone else was afraid of. The comlink on his desk chimed. David accepted the connection and 6 faces appeared on the screen. These were his researchers. The people who had volunteered to study the most isolated and dangerous nature worlds in known space. Dr. Patricia Okoye from Verdun 7. Dr. Martin Cross from Greenvale 9. Dr. Owen Park from Chrysalis. Dr. Rachel Summers from Hiveworld. Dr. Timothy Brooks from Granite 4. Dr. Sandra Mills from Phase World 12. They all looked tired. They all looked angry. Tell me you're fighting this, Patricia said without preamble. Tell me we're not just abandoning them. David looked at each face in turn. Tell me what's really happening out there. The council says you've been violating protocols. They say you've put yourselves in danger. They say these creatures are too unpredictable to approach safely. Martin laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course they say that. They've been saying that for centuries. It's how they justify what they did, who did. What are you talking about? The 6 researchers exchanged glances. Finally, Patricia spoke. David, we need to show you something. All of us, but not over a comm channel. Can you get to Verdun 7? The evacuation order goes into effect in 1 month. I don't think. Then you have 1 month to get here. Because what we found changes everything. The council didn't designate these worlds as nature preserves to protect them. They did it to hide something. Something terrible. David felt cold certainty settle in his chest. How bad?
Genocide bad, Timothy said flatly.
Cover-up bad. War crimes bad. David, these creatures we befriended, they're not supposed to exist. The council declared them extinct centuries ago. But they're not extinct. They've been hiding, and they only revealed themselves to us because we were the first people in hundreds of years who didn't try to kill them. The room spun slightly. David gripped the edge of his desk. You're telling me the council lied about extinction? Why would they do that? Because some of the council species were the ones doing the killing, Rachel said. Her voice was hard as stone. And when humans showed up and these creatures came out of hiding, we became a threat. Not because we're dangerous, because we see them as people instead of resources. David took a deep breath. His diplomatic training fought against his instincts. The smart move would be to evacuate, to follow orders, to not make waves with civilizations that had been spacefaring for thousands of years before humanity learned to make fire. But he looked at the faces on his screen and thought about what Roger had said. Inappropriate emotional attachment, as if caring about another living being was something to be ashamed of. I'll be there in 3 days, he said. All of you gather everything you can. Documents, recordings, physical evidence. If we're going to accuse the Council of genocide, we need to be absolutely certain. We're certain, Patricia said, but you need to see it yourself. You need to meet them. Once you do, you'll understand why we can't leave. The connection ended. David sat in silence for a long moment. Then he stood and started packing. Roger watched from the doorway. This is going to end your career, Roger said. Probably end all of our careers. Maybe get us arrested. I know. And you're doing it anyway? David looked at his assistant and friend. Roger, how many times have we sat in council meetings and listened to speeches about civilization? About cooperation? About the sacred duty to protect intelligent life? He gestured at the data pads full of charges. If we abandon people who trusted us just because it's politically convenient, Then what does that make us? What does that make our civilization worth? Roger was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. I'll book us a fast ship. If we're going to commit career suicide, we might as well do it efficiently. 3 days later, David stood on the landing platform of Research Station Poseidon on Verdun 7. The planet was beautiful. Endless ocean stretched in every direction, broken only by massive floating forests of kelp-like organisms. The water was impossibly blue and clear. Patricia met him at the airlock. She looked different than she had over the comm. Thinner, more tired, but also more determined. Thank you for coming, she said simply. Show me, David replied. She led him to the observation deck, and there, floating in the water beside the platform, was the most magnificent creature David had ever seen. 70 meters long, covered in scales that shifted between blue and purple. Rows of crystalline spines along its back glowed softly in the fading light. 6 intelligent eyes studied him with obvious curiosity. This is Rover, Patricia said. She's a thornback leviathan. According to council records, her species went extinct 400 years ago, killed off because they were too dangerous to coexist with civilization. David stared at the creature. At Rover, she made a sound like distant thunder. A greeting. She's asking if you're a friend, Patricia translated. She's asking if you're part of the pack. David looked at this impossible creature. This person who shouldn't exist, who had survived by hiding for 4 centuries, who had taken a chance and revealed herself to strangers. Tell her yes, he said. Tell her I'm a friend, and tell her I'm going to make sure the truth comes out. Patricia smiled. It was the first genuine smile David had seen from her. She made a series of clicking sounds and gestures. Rover rumbled in response. She says, welcome to the pod. She says humans are good strange. And she says you should prepare yourself because once you see what we've found, there's no going back. David nodded slowly. I'm ready. But he wasn't. Nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to learn. Nothing could have prepared him for the choice he would have to make. And nothing could have prepared him for the war that was coming. Rover led them into the deep water just after dawn. Patricia wore her diving suit and held onto a harness that the massive Leviathan seemed to barely notice. David followed in a small submersible, piloted by Patricia's research partner, Hero. The ocean around Verdun 7 was crystal clear, and David could see dozens of other Leviathans swimming in formation around them. They moved with purpose and grace that seemed impossible for creatures so large. Where are we going? David asked through the comm system. The nesting grounds, Patricia's voice came back. It's where Rover's pod raises their young. It's also where they keep their history. The water grew darker as they descended. David watched the depth gauge climb. 500 meters, 1,000, 1,500. Finally, they leveled out at 2,000 meters deep. The submersible's lights illuminated a vast underwater canyon. What David saw made his breath catch in his throat. Bones. Thousands upon thousands of massive skeletons covered the canyon floor. Each one was easily as large as Rover, but these weren't the remains of natural deaths. Even from the submersible, David could see the cut marks, the drill holes, the systematic dismantling of bodies that spoke of industrial efficiency rather than predation. This is a graveyard, Patricia's voice was hollow. Rover brought me here 2 weeks ago. She wanted me to understand what happened to her people. David stared at the evidence of atrocity. How many? We've counted over 6,000 skeletons in this canyon alone, and Rover has shown us 3 other sites. David, there used to be hundreds of thousands of Leviathans on this world. Now there are maybe 2,000 left, and they've been hiding for 400 years. The submersible moved slowly through the canyon. David recorded everything. Every skeleton. Every mark. Every piece of evidence. The council records say the Leviathans were dangerous predators, David said. They claimed extinction was necessary for safety. They lied. Patricia's voice was hard. I've spent 3 years with Rover and her pod. They have language. They have culture. They remember their dead by name. They teach their children through song. They're not predators, David, they're people, and the council knew it. Rover made a long, mournful sound that echoed through the water. Other Leviathans joined her, creating a symphony of grief that was almost unbearable to hear. What is she saying? David asked quietly. She's singing the names of the dead. It's a memorial ceremony. They do this once every lunar cycle. They remember everyone they lost. David closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his jaw was set. Take me back up. I need to contact the other stations. 2 hours later, David sat in the research station's communications center. The screen showed 5 other locations. Martin on Greenvale 9 stood in a forest of massive trees, surrounded by wolf-like creatures with fur that seemed to burn with internal fire. Owen on Crystallis was perched on a crystal outcropping with a flock of bird-like beings that refracted light into rainbow patterns. Rachel stood inside what looked like a massive insect hive. Timothy was surrounded by beings that looked like living boulders. Sandra stood in a space that seemed to flicker and shift, with serpentine creatures that phased in and out of visibility. "All right," David said. "Everyone show me what you found." Martin went first. The Cinder Wolves. According to council records, they were hunted to extinction 300 years ago for their pelts and organs. But I found a population of over 5,000 living in underground caves. And David, they showed me paintings. Cave art that goes back centuries. They documented everything. The screen shifted to show images on cave walls. David saw crude but recognizable depictions of ships landing, of creatures being captured, of entire packs being slaughtered, and species symbols that matched current council members. The Raytheons were the primary hunters, Martin continued. But there were others. The Quilix bought Cinderwolf organs for traditional medicine. The paintings show at least 6 different species involved in the harvesting. Owen spoke next. The Prism Wings were luxury pets, status symbols for wealthy collectors. They're beautiful, intelligent, and they can't survive in captivity for long, so the demand was constant. The collectors didn't care that they were killing them. There was always another one to buy. He gestured to the creatures around him. These are survivors of transport accidents, escaped specimens, refugees. They've been breeding in these crystal canyons for 50 years, hiding from scanners. Every one of them remembers captivity. Every one of them has scars. Rachel's report was worse. The hiveborn were used as slave labor, industrial work, dangerous factory operations. They're naturally strong and can coordinate perfectly through their hive mind, so various corporations bought them by the millions and worked them until they died, then bought more. The council knew. Some council members owned the factories. Timothy showed David ancient facility records. The Stoneborn concentrate rare minerals in their bodies. They're literally living mines, so various species would find them, keep them in dormancy using sonic weapons, and extract minerals until there was nothing left. The beings I've befriended here are all that remain of a species that used to number in the billions. Sandra's evidence was perhaps most damning. The Phaskin were weapons, military assets. Their ability to exist partially in subspace made them perfect for espionage and assassination. They were bred, trained, and deployed by at least 4 different council militaries. When they proved too difficult to control, the militaries declared them extinct and abandoned them. Echo, the one I befriended, has memories of being forced to kill. She was 3 years old when they made her into a weapon. David absorbed it all. The evidence was overwhelming. 6 different species, 6 different types of exploitation, all covered up by declaring them extinct and making their worlds off limits. The nature world designation wasn't protection, he said slowly. It was a quarantine. Keep people away so no one would discover these species survived. No one would ask questions about what happened to them. Exactly, Patricia confirmed. And it worked for centuries. Until we showed up? Why did they reveal themselves to you? David asked. Why trust humans after all that? The researchers exchanged glances. Finally, Martin answered. Because we didn't try to capture them. We didn't try to study them like specimens. We just talked to them, shared food, sat with them, treated them like people instead of research subjects. And after centuries of hiding, of fearing every contact with civilization, they took a chance on us. And now the council wants us gone before we can expose the truth, David finished. What are we going to do? Owen asked. We have 1 month before forced evacuation. That's not enough time to build a legal case, not enough time to get this evidence reviewed by independent authorities. David smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Who said anything about legal processes? The council gave us 1 month. That's plenty of time. Time for what? Patricia asked. To tell everyone, every independent news network, every planetary government not aligned with the council, every species that's ever felt marginalized by council politics. We release everything at once. Documents, videos, testimonials, make it impossible for the council to suppress. David's voice hardened. They tried to hide genocide by declaring it extinction. We're going to show the galaxy what really happened. That's going to cause a massive political crisis, Hero said quietly. Good. It should. These beings deserve justice, and if the Council won't provide it voluntarily, then we'll force them to face it publicly. Rachel leaned forward. David, you understand what you're suggesting? This could start a war. Multiple species will demand accountability. Some might try to protect their interests through force. Earth could end up in the crossfire, I know. But what's the alternative? We evacuate. We stay quiet. We let these people stay hidden and afraid for another few centuries. David shook his head. No. Humanity joined the galactic community because we believed in cooperation, in justice, in protecting those who need protection. If we walk away now, then what was the point of reaching the stars? Patricia smiled. Beside her, Rover made a rumbling sound that the translator rendered as agreement. All right then, Martin said. Let's burn it all down. Let's show the galaxy who the real monsters are. Over the next 2 weeks, the researchers worked around the clock. They compiled evidence. They recorded testimonies. They translated the memories and histories that their new friends shared with them. And they prepared for the fallout. David coordinated with Roger, who had remained on the diplomatic station. Together, they identified every media outlet, every independent government, every potential ally who might be willing to broadcast the truth. On day 26 of the evacuation deadline, David gave the order. The data packages went out simultaneously to 300 different locations across the galaxy. News networks, planetary assemblies, academic institutions, anywhere with the infrastructure to receive and broadcast information. Within 6 hours, the story was everywhere. Images of mass graves and industrial facilities, financial records showing centuries of profit from exploitation, videos of creatures thought extinct, alive and testifying to what had been done to them, the translations of their words, their memories, their grief. The galaxy exploded in outrage. By day 28, 17 planetary governments had demanded emergency council sessions. 5 species had withdrawn their representatives in protest. 3 had threatened military action against council members. The markets crashed as corporations linked to the exploitation saw their stocks collapse. And on day 30, the deadline for evacuation, a fleet of council ships arrived at Verdun 7. David stood on the observation deck and watched them take up positions in orbit. 23 warships, more than enough to force compliance. But he also watched as hundreds of Leviathans surfaced around the research station, as Rover and her entire pod formed a protective barrier between the humans and the sky. They're not going to let us leave, Patricia said quietly. Even if we wanted to. They've decided we're pod members, family, and they don't abandon family. David smiled grimly. Then I guess we see this through to the end. The comlink crackled. A stern voice demanded immediate evacuation or face forceful removal. David picked up the comm and spoke clearly. This is Ambassador David Wright. We're not leaving. If you want us off this world, you'll have to go through them. And good luck with that. Fleet Commander Tallis had served in the Council Enforcement Division for 40 years. He had handled rebellions, border disputes, and pirate incursions. He had never faced anything like this. His tactical display showed the human research station clearly. 6 humans, basic facilities, no weapons. By any military standard, it should be a simple extraction. Land troops remove the humans, destroy any sensitive equipment, and leave. But between his ships and that station floated several hundred thornback leviathans, each one massing several thousand tons, each one equipped with crystalline spines that could punch through starship hulls. Each one watching his fleet with obvious intelligence and hostile intent. Sir, we have similar reports from all 6 nature worlds, his second officer reported. The creatures are forming defensive perimeters. They're not attacking, but they're not letting our forces through either. Tallis pulled up the data from Greenvale 9. The Cinderwolves had created a living wall around the research station there, thousands of them arranged in military formations that showed tactical sophistication. On Crystallis, the prism wings were flying patterns that scrambled sensors and navigation systems. On the other world, similar defensive measures. These creatures are coordinating across 6 different star systems, Tallis said slowly. How is that possible? They're supposed to be primitive, non-technological. Permission to speak freely, sir? His second officer asked. Granted. Maybe we were wrong about them being primitive. Tallis stared at the display. at the Leviathans maintaining perfect formation, at the clear intelligence in their movements. Then he opened a channel to the research station. Dr. Okoye, I need you to understand the situation. I have orders to extract you. My orders authorize force if necessary, but I don't want casualties on either side. Please be reasonable. The woman's voice came back clear and calm. Commander, reasonable would have been not conducting genocide. Reasonable would have been not covering it up for centuries. Reasonable would have been listening when we first reported these species were alive. You don't get to ask for reasonable now. I'm just following orders, that's what they all say. The people who ran the harvesting facilities probably said the same thing. Commander, I have a question for you. Did you review the evidence we released? Tallis hesitated. He had. Late at night, unable to sleep, he had watched the videos. Seen the graves, read the testimonies. It had made him sick, I did, he admitted. And do you believe it's true? Another hesitation. Longer this time. Yes. Then what are you doing here? Why are you following orders to help cover it up? Tallis felt something break inside him. He was a soldier. He followed orders. That was what soldiers did. But he had also sworn an oath to protect intelligent life. To uphold justice. To serve civilization itself. Not just the council that claimed to represent it. Stand by, he said, and closed the channel. He looked at his crew. Good people, professional. They had followed him for years because they trusted him. Now he was going to ask them to make the same choice he was making. All right, everyone listen. I'm going to tell you what I think is happening here. These humans found evidence of war crimes. They tried to report it through proper channels. The council ignored them and tried to silence them through evacuation orders. Now we're here to enforce those orders. He paused. I think we're on the wrong side. The bridge was silent. Then his second officer stood up. Sir, if you're refusing orders, I want it noted that I support that decision. One by one, other crew members stood. Not all of them. Some looked conflicted. Some looked angry. But more than half the bridge crew rose to their feet in solidarity. Tallis felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Transmit a message to the fleet. All ships hold position. No hostile actions. I'm going down to talk to the humans personally. And someone get me a channel to Council Command. I need to have a very frank conversation with some very powerful people. Rover watched the small shuttle descend from the lead ship. She tasted the water around her, sensing the chemical signals from her pod. They were nervous but holding formation. The humans had been clear. Wait. Watch. Only defend if attacked. The shuttle landed gently on the platform. Patricia stood beside David and Hero, waiting. The hatch opened and a tall figure emerged. Commander Tallis wore the formal uniform of the Enforcement Division. He looked tired. Ambassador Wright, Dr. Okoye. He nodded to each of them. Thank you for agreeing to meet. You came alone? David asked. I came to talk, not fight, and I wanted to see them myself. Tallis approached the edge of the platform slowly. Rover swam closer, bringing her massive head level with the platform. Six eyes studied the commander with obvious intelligence. This is Rover, Patricia said. She's the leader of this pod. She speaks for her people. Tallis stared at the Leviathan, at the clear awareness in those eyes. The council report said your species was extinct, that you had been eliminated because you were too dangerous to coexist with civilization. Rover made a sound. The translator Patricia War rendered it. They lied, we hid. We survived. We remember. Remember what? Tallis asked quietly. Everything. Every hunt. Every death. Every child taken. We remember faces. We remember ships. We remember which species came to kill us. Rover's voice through the translator was surprisingly gentle. We remember you. Your species never hunted us. You have no blood debt. Tallis felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what was done to you. I'm sorry I came here to help hide it. Words are cheap. Actions matter. What will you do now? The commander looked at David and Patricia, then back at Rover. I'm going to refuse my orders. I'm going to recommend my entire fleet stand down. And I'm going to testify about everything I've seen here. Will that be enough? It is a start, Rover said. We do not want war. We want peace. We want safety. We want the truth to matter. Before anyone could respond, the comlink exploded with urgent transmissions. Multiple ships were breaking formation. Some were following Tallis's lead and standing down, but others were moving into attack positions. Commander, this is Captain Relis of the enforcement ship Fury. You are relieved of command for failure to execute orders. I am taking tactical control of the fleet." Talus swore under his breath. Relis is a hardliner. He's not going to back down. David pulled up the tactical display. 6 ships had broken off from the main fleet. They were launching assault transports and taking up firing positions. "They're really going to do this," Hero said in disbelief. "They're going to attack." Patricia looked at Rover. The massive Leviathan had gone very still. Her spines were glowing brighter now. In the water around the station, hundreds of other Leviathans were responding. The ocean itself seemed to pulse with gathered energy. "Rover, no," Patricia said urgently. "If you fight back, they'll use it as justification. They'll say you're dangerous. They'll say we were right to try to eliminate you. And if we do nothing, they take you. They silence truth. They win." Rover's translated voice was sad. "We have hidden for 400 years. We have survived by being invisible. We are tired of hiding. We are tired of being afraid." The assault transports were descending now, 6 of them carrying armed troops. They would reach the station in minutes. Then something unexpected happened. 17 ships from the original fleet moved to intercept. They positioned themselves between the hostile transports and the research station. Commander Talus stared at his display in shock. "All ships, this is Vice Commander Saris. Commander Talus's orders stand. No hostile action against the research station or the native species. Any ship attempting to attack will be fired upon." The hostile transport slowed, then stopped. Captain Relis's voice came over the comm, filled with rage. "You're all committing mutiny. You're all going to be court-martialed." "Probably," Saris agreed calmly. "But we're not going to be war criminals." "Stand down, Relis. You're outnumbered." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the hostile ships began to retreat. Within 20 minutes, they had withdrawn to high orbit. Commander Talus let out a breath he had been holding. "Well, that could have gone worse." David looked at the commander with new respect. "You just threw away your career for us, for them." "Why?" "Because 40 years ago I took an oath. I swore to protect intelligent life, to uphold justice, to serve something bigger than myself." Talus looked at Rover. "I may not have always lived up to that oath, but today seems like a good day to start." Rover made a sound that the translator rendered as approval. "The pod accepts Commander Talus. He is pack, he is family. We protect our family." "I'm honored," Talus said simply. Over the next several hours, similar scenes played out across all 6 nature worlds. Some enforcement fleets stood down entirely. Others split, with roughly half the forces refusing orders. No shots were fired. No one died. But the galaxy watched as hundreds of military personnel chose conscience over command. David received a transmission late that evening. It was from High Chancellor Moros himself. The ancient being looked even more tired than usual. "Ambassador Wright, I need to speak with you, and with the beings your people have befriended. Will they meet with me?" David looked at Patricia, who looked at Rover. The Leviathan considered for a long moment. "Yes, the Old One may come, but he comes alone. He comes unarmed, and he comes in truth." "Agreed," Moros said. "I'll arrive within 3 days. And, Ambassador, thank you for what you've done, for refusing to let the past stay buried. It's time for a reckoning." The channel closed. Patricia turned to David with a worried expression. "Can we trust him?" "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." Rover rumbled thoughtfully. "The Old One carries much guilt. I taste it in his words. He comes seeking forgiveness. Whether he deserves it, we will see." 3 days later, a small shuttle descended to Research Station Poseidon. High Chancellor Moros emerged slowly, leaning heavily on a walking staff. He approached the platform where humans and Leviathans waited together. He looked at Rover for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, the High Chancellor knelt. 500 years ago, I voted against exploiting your people. I was outvoted. I told myself I would fix it later. I told myself I would rise high enough in the council to make things right." His voice broke. "I failed you. I failed all of you. And I've carried that failure every day since." Rover lowered her massive head until she was eye level with the kneeling elder. "You speak truth. We taste it. But truth without action is hollow. What will you do now?" Moros raised his head. "I will stand before the galaxy and confess everything. I will name names. I will provide evidence. And I will demand that the council face justice for what was done. Even if it destroys you, I destroyed myself 500 years ago when I chose politics over principle. This is just making it official." Rover was silent for a moment. Then she gently touched the top of Moros's head with her nose. "The pod accepts your atonement. Now prove you mean it." The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had hosted many historic moments across its 1,000-year existence. Today would be remembered as the day everything changed. Security checkpoints ringed the chamber. Every delegate had been scanned. Every observer verified. The council was taking no chances. But the precautions seemed almost absurd given who was inside. The chamber floor had been modified for the occasion. A massive water tank now occupied one section, large enough to hold a dozen thornback leviathans. Reinforced platforms surrounded it, bearing the weight of several stoneborn. Environmental controls had been adjusted to accommodate the Phaskin's unique needs. Specialized lighting let the prism wings display properly. The Hiveborn occupied a specially constructed area that allowed their collective consciousness to function. And the Cinderwolves lay in patient formation, their eyes tracking every movement in the room. Beside each group stood the human researchers, Patricia with Rover, Martin with Ash, Owen with Sparkle, Rachel with Whisper, Timothy with Boulder, Sandra with Echo, and standing at the central podium, Ambassador David Wright. Every seat in the observer galleries was filled. Every major news network in the galaxy had cameras present. Millions, perhaps billions, watched via live broadcast. This was not just a council meeting. This was a trial. High Chancellor Morrow stood at the speaker's position. He looked older than his centuries somehow, smaller, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "This council is called to order. We gather today to address allegations of grave crimes spanning centuries, crimes involving multiple council species, crimes that strike at the very heart of what this body claims to represent." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. "Ambassador Wright has presented evidence. I have reviewed it. It is accurate. It is damning, and it implicates 3 council species directly, along with numerous individuals from a dozen others." Moros paused. "I was one of those individuals. 500 years ago, I voted against measures to protect these beings from exploitation. I told myself I would fix things later. I lied to myself for 5 centuries." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouting. Observers calling out. Moros raised his hand and slowly, silence returned. The thornback leviathans were declared extinct 400 years ago. The declaration was false. They were hunted nearly to extinction for biological compounds. Their bodies were processed in industrial facilities. Their young were taken for study. The Raytheon collective profited enormously from this trade. The Raytheon delegation seats were empty. They had refused to attend. Their absence was noted by everyone. The Cinderwolves were declared extinct 300 years ago. Also false. They were hunted for pelts and organs. Entire packs were slaughtered. The Quillix pharmaceutical industry built its fortune on Cinderwolf biology, traditional medicine that required them to die. More empty seats where the Quillix should have sat. The Prism Wings, the Hiveborn, the Stoneborn, the Phaskin, all declared extinct, all still alive. All victims of systematic exploitation that this council either authorized or ignored. Moros's voice grew stronger. "We stood here and gave speeches about civilization, about cooperation, about protecting intelligent life.
And we were lying.
We were killing. We were profiting from genocide. These are serious allegations," a delegate called out. "But where is your proof?" David stepped forward. "I'll show you." The holographic displays activated. Images filled the chamber. The graveyard on Verdun 7. Thousands of Leviathan skeletons showing signs of industrial processing. Cave paintings from Greenvale 9 documenting centuries of hunting. Financial records showing transactions worth trillions. Cargo manifests listing beings as merchandise. Video footage from abandoned facilities showing the brutal efficiency of the harvesting operations. The chamber fell silent as the evidence played. Minutes stretched into an hour. The images were relentless, undeniable, sickening. When the display finally ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Then Rover's voice echoed through the chamber, translated for all to hear. "We remember every death, every child stolen, every hunt. We remember faces. We remember ships. We remember which voices gave orders and which hands pulled triggers. We remember all of it. Ash, the cinder wolf, stood and approached the empty Rathian seats. My grandmother was skinned alive while still breathing. My father watched his entire pack executed for sport. My mate was taken when she was pregnant. I never saw her again. We remember. Sparkle, the prism wing, created a light display. Not beautiful this time, harsh, sharp, painful to look at. Cages, darkness, starvation, forced displays until wings broke from exhaustion. Hatchlings sold before they could fly. We remember. One by one, representatives from each species spoke. Their words were simple, direct, devastating. They were not asking for pity. They were demanding accountability. What do you want? A delegate finally asked. Revenge? Reparations? War? Rover considered the question. We want the truth recognized. We want safety guaranteed. We want those responsible to face justice. We want to stop hiding. That's all? The delegate sounded skeptical. We do not want revenge. Revenge would make us like those who hurt us. We want justice. We want things to change so this never happens again. We want the galaxy to see us as people, not resources. Another delegate stood. This one was from the Pathani, humanity's allies. I move for the immediate establishment of protected status for all 6 species. Full council resources devoted to their security and recovery. Seconded, came from the Corvian delegation. I move for war crimes tribunals. All individuals involved in the exploitation must face trial. Seconded, I move for the dissolution of corporate entities that profited from these crimes. Their assets to be seized and used for reparations. Seconded. The motions came rapidly now. Delegates from dozens of species, all proposing actions. Some were genuine, some were political theater, attempting to distance themselves from the crimes. But the momentum was building. Then a voice cut through the chaos. I object. Everyone turned. A Rathian delegate had entered after all. She stood in the doorway, flanked by guards. These allegations are propaganda. These humans have fabricated evidence to destabilize the council. These creatures are not intelligent beings. They are animals that have been trained to mimic speech. The chamber went very quiet. Very cold. Patricia stepped forward. You want to test their intelligence? Ask them questions. Give them problems to solve. Treat them like the delegates you sit beside and see how they compare. An interesting proposal, the Rathian delegate said. Very well. Let's test these so-called intelligent beings. What followed was extraordinary. For 3 hours, council members posed questions, mathematical problems, logical puzzles, historical inquiries, ethical dilemmas. The 6 species answered everything. Not just correctly, but thoughtfully, with nuance, with perspectives that often surpassed those of the questioners. Boulder, the Stoneborn, solved a mathematical equation that had stumped council scientists for decades. His unique perception of time and space gave him insights that younger species simply could not match. Whisper, the Hiveborn, proposed a solution to an industrial safety problem that was both more efficient and more humane than current practices. Her collective intelligence approached problems from angles that individual minds never considered. Echo, the Phaskin, discussed physics in ways that made several scientists frantically take notes. Her existence in multiple dimensions gave her direct experience with theories that others could only hypothesize about. By the time the demonstration ended, the Rathian delegate looked shaken. She tried once more. This proves nothing. They could have been coached. Enough. High Chancellor Moros's voice was quiet, but it carried. You embarrass yourself and your species. These beings are obviously intelligent, obviously people, obviously victims of crimes that we are responsible for. Accept it with dignity or leave. The Rathian delegate looked around the chamber. She found no support. No allies, only judgment. Finally, she turned and left without another word. Moros addressed the chamber. We will now vote on the proposed measures. Protected status, tribunals, reparations, dissolution of responsible entities. All in favor? The vote was not unanimous. Several delegates abstained. A handful voted against, but the overwhelming majority voted yes. The measures pass, Moros declared. These 6 species are hereby granted full protection under council law. Criminal investigations will begin immediately and... He paused. I hereby resign my position as High Chancellor, effective immediately. I submit myself to the same tribunals I just authorized. I will not claim innocence. I will accept whatever judgment is deemed appropriate. The chamber erupted again, delegates shouting, observers crying out. Morrow simply bowed to the assembly and walked slowly from his position. David watched him go with complex emotions. The ancient being had carried guilt for 5 centuries. Now he was finally facing it. There was something almost noble in that, even if it came far too late. Patricia approached David. Is this it? Is it over? The easy part is over. Now comes the hard part, rebuilding trust, making sure this never happens again, actually changing things. David looked at the 6 species still present in the chamber. They survived genocide. They survived being erased from history. Now they have to survive justice. That might be hardest of all. Rover made a sound that might have been agreement. Justice is slow. Justice is painful. But justice is necessary. We will be patient. Over the next several weeks, the galaxy transformed. The tribunals began. Evidence was presented. Testimonies were heard. Verdicts were rendered. 3 former council members were convicted of war crimes. 17 corporate executives faced prosecution. The Raytheon government fell in a bloodless coup, replaced by reformers who promised cooperation with investigations. The Quillix pharmaceutical industry was nationalized. Its entire research library opened for review. Thousands of products were found to contain materials harvested from extinct or endangered species. Production halted immediately. Protected territories were established on all 6 nature worlds. But now they were truly protected. Council guards vetted carefully, stationed to prevent any exploitation. The species could finally live without hiding. And something else happened. Something unexpected. Other species came forward. Beings from a dozen different worlds claiming their people had also been exploited, also been declared extinct, also been hiding. The 6 known cases were just the beginning. The conspiracy ran deeper than anyone had imagined. David found himself coordinating what became known as the Recovery Initiative. 47 worlds were identified as possibly hiding survivors of species declared extinct. Human teams, along with volunteers from sympathetic species, began exploration and contact missions. They found survivors on 32 of the 47 worlds. Some were small populations barely hanging on. Others were thriving hidden communities. All had stories of exploitation and survival. All had hidden because trust was too dangerous. The work was hard. The progress was slow. But it was happening. 6 months after the council testimony, Patricia sat on the observation deck of Research Station Poseidon. Rover floated beside her as always. But now Rover was not alone. A young leviathan, barely 20 meters long, swam playful circles around its mother. She's beautiful, Patricia said. What are you going to name her? Rover rumbled thoughtfully. Then through the translator, Hope. We name her Hope, because she is first of her generation born without fear, born into a galaxy that sees us as people, born free. Patricia felt tears on her cheeks. That's perfect. In the distance, other young leviathans played in the water. The pods were growing again. Not just surviving anymore, thriving. David's voice came over the comm. Patricia, you should see the news. The Hiveborn just opened their first public hive. They're offering to teach their construction techniques to anyone interested. Thousands of species are applying. Patricia smiled. What about the others? The Cinderwolves are establishing cultural exchange programs. The Prism Wings are performing at a major arts festival next month. The Stoneborn are being consulted on geological surveys across 20 systems. The Phaskin are teaching physics to university students. They're not just surviving, Patricia. They're becoming part of galactic society, for real this time. And the tribunals? Still ongoing. It's going to take years, maybe decades, but it's happening. Justice is slow, but it's real. Patricia watched Hope swim circles around Rover. The young Leviathan had never known fear, would never have to hide, would grow up in a galaxy that saw her as a person. We did it, she said softly. We actually did it. You sound surprised, David replied. I am. 6 months ago, we were facing forced evacuation and threats of arrest. Now we're rebuilding an entire galactic society. That's what happens when you refuse to accept injustice, when you choose truth over convenience, when you see people as people instead of problems. David paused. The galaxy is better now. Not perfect, not even close, but better. Rover rumbled agreement. Humans are good, strange. You see friends where others see resources. You pack bond with everything. It is your weakness and your strength. I'll take that as a compliment, Patricia laughed. It is, your strangeness saved us. Your friendship gave us hope. Your stubbornness changed everything. Rover gently bumped Patricia's shoulder. Thank you. Thank you for trusting us, for revealing yourselves, for taking that chance. Hope swam up to the platform, curious about the conversation. Patricia reached out and carefully touched the young Leviathan's nose. The creature made a happy sound. She likes you, Rover observed. The feeling is mutual. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, other Leviathans sang their evening songs. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. It was hope made real. The first anniversary celebration of the revelation, as it had come to be known, was held simultaneously across all 6 recovered worlds. Patricia stood on a newly expanded platform at Research Station Poseidon, watching hundreds of Leviathans gather in the water below. But these were not just Rover's original pod anymore. Leviathans from distant oceans had traveled here, drawn by the news that it was finally safe to emerge. Rover floated beside the platform with Hope and 3 other young ones who had been born in the past year. The massive Leviathan looked content in a way Patricia had never seen before. The constant tension, the ever-present wariness had finally eased. 17 new pods have made contact this month, Patricia told David over the comlink. They've been hiding in the deep trenches. Some of them haven't surfaced in over a century. They're scared, but they're coming up. Same story everywhere, David replied. We're finding survivors in places we never thought to look. The Cinder Wolves had an entire underground city on Greenvale 9. Martin estimates the population is over 20,000, not 5,000, like we originally thought. They've been living below ground so long they've adapted. Specialized eye structures for low light, enhanced hearing. Patricia felt a mixture of joy and sadness. They changed themselves just to survive, just to hide from us, not from us, from everyone else. That's what makes this so important, Patricia. We're not just documenting survival. We're documenting the cost of that survival. These species didn't just lose numbers. They lost their natural way of life. They became smaller, quieter, hidden versions of themselves. Rover made a rumbling sound. Patricia had learned to read the Leviathan's moods well enough to know this was agreement, mixed with old pain. Rover says she remembers when her people sang across entire oceans, when their songs could be heard from pole to pole. Now they sing quietly in small groups, afraid to draw attention. Patricia translated. She says Hope will learn the old songs, the loud ones, the ones meant to be heard. That's good. That's what this is all about. Not just surviving, but actually living again. The celebration began at sunset. On Verdun 7, the Leviathan sang. On Greenvale 9, the Cinderwolves howled. On Crystallis, the Prism Wings performed an aerial display that could be seen from orbit. On each world, the supposedly extinct species announced their existence to the galaxy with joy instead of fear. But the evening brought unexpected news. Roger contacted David with urgency in his voice. We have a situation. A ship just arrived at the edge of Verdun 7's system. It's not broadcasting council identification. It's not responding to hails. And David, it's massive. Easily 10 times the size of any ship in the original enforcement fleet. David felt cold certainty settle in his chest. Are we sure it's not council? Positive. The design doesn't match any known configuration. It's just sitting there at the system edge watching. Patricia overheard the conversation through the open comm. Could it be one of the species we exposed? Coming for revenge? Or someone who wants to finish what they started? David said grimly. Get everyone to alert status. If that ship makes a hostile move, I want our people protected. But the ship did not make a hostile move. Instead, after 6 hours of silence, it sent a message. Just 2 words in standard galactic. Requesting contact. David authorized a response. This is Ambassador David Wright of Earth. Identify yourself and state your purpose. The reply came with a video feed. The being on the screen was unlike anything in the Council databases. Crystalline structure, but mobile. Bioluminescent patterns rippling across its surface. Ancient beyond measure, if David was any judge. I am keeper of the deep archives, the being said in a voice that seemed to resonate in multiple frequencies. We have been watching for a very long time. We have been waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to tell the truth. For someone to see the hidden peoples. For someone to care enough to act. The keeper shifted, its crystalline structure refracting light in impossible ways. We are archivists, watchers, we document civilizations. We record their rise and fall. We judge their worth not by their power but by their choices. David felt a chill run down his spine. How long have you been watching? The Galactic Council has existed for 1,000 years. We have watched for 900 of them. We watched as they discovered the Leviathans and declared them a threat. We watched as they harvested the Cinderwolves nearly to extinction. We watched as species after species was exploited, then erased from history. We documented all of it. Why didn't you intervene? That is not our purpose. We witness, we record, but we do not interfere. The Keeper paused. Until now. What's changed? You have. Humanity has. You found the hidden peoples. You listened to them. You believed them. You risked everything to tell their truth. The Keeper's bioluminescence pulsed. In 900 years of watching, you are the first to do this. The first to choose justice over comfort. The first to see intelligence where others saw resources. Patricia joined the conversation. You said you documented everything. Do you have evidence? More than what we found? We have records of 643 species declared extinct by the Council. We have documentation of the real circumstances of each extinction. We have proof of crimes spanning centuries. The Keeper's voice grew heavy. And we have located survivors of 17 additional species that even you have not found yet. The revelation stunned everyone on the comm. 643 species, 17 more survivors waiting to be found. The scale was almost incomprehensible. Why are you telling us this now? David asked. Because you have proven you will use it correctly. Because you have shown you care more about justice than politics. Because these peoples need advocates and humanity has volunteered for that role. The Keeper shifted again. We offer you our archives. All of them. Use them to continue your work. Find the survivors. Tell their stories. Change the galaxy. David looked at Patricia, at Rover watching from the water, at the celebration happening around them. They had thought 6 species was overwhelming. Now they were being offered evidence of hundreds more. This will start a revolution, David said slowly. Not just political, social. The entire structure of galactic society will have to change. Yes, the Keeper agreed. Is that not what you wanted? It's what they deserve, David said, gesturing to the Leviathans. All of them. Every hidden people who survived when they should have been wiped out. Every species that learned to live with fear just to stay alive. They deserve better than hiding. Then accept our gift. The archives are yours. Over the next several weeks, the scale of the conspiracy became clear. The deep archives contained evidence of systematic exploitation, dating back nearly 1,000 years. Species after species had been declared extinct when in fact they had simply gone into hiding. Some had been hunted for resources. Some had been enslaved. Some had been wiped out simply because they occupied territory that other species wanted. The original 6 species were not unique. They were just the first to be rediscovered. The first to trust humans enough to reveal themselves. But across the galaxy, hundreds of others remained hidden, waiting, hoping, afraid to emerge. David coordinated with the Reformed Council, which had replaced the old corrupt system. New teams were organized. Not just humans this time, but volunteers from dozens of species. All carefully vetted, all committed to the same principle. Find the survivors, protect them, help them reclaim their place in galactic society. The work was massive. The recovery initiative expanded from 6 worlds to over 100 potential sites. Each one required careful approach. Each hidden species needed to be convinced that it was finally safe to emerge. Each one carried centuries of trauma that needed to be acknowledged and addressed. Patricia found herself training new researchers, teaching them what she had learned from Rover, how to approach without threatening, how to listen instead of demand, how to recognize intelligence in forms that might seem alien or strange. The most important thing, she told a class of eager young scientists, is to see them as people first. Not specimens, not research subjects, people who have survived incredible trauma and still chose to trust you. Honor that trust. Rover attended some of these sessions floating in her tank while Patricia taught. Her presence was powerful, a reminder that the supposedly extinct could not only survive but thrive when given the chance. One of the new researchers raised their hand. Dr. Okoye, what do we do if a species doesn't want contact? If they prefer to stay hidden? You respect that choice. You leave them resources. You make sure they know how to reach out if they change their minds, and you make sure they're protected from anyone who might exploit them. Patricia's voice was firm. We're not here to force contact. We're here to offer safety. If they want to remain hidden in safety, that's their right. Rover rumbled agreement. Some of us will never trust outsiders again. The wounds are too deep. That choice must be honored. The researcher nodded, understanding. 3 months into the expanded recovery initiative, they made their first major discovery. A world designated as uninhabited actually hosted a population of nearly 50,000 beings. They called themselves the Depth Dwellers, and they had been hiding in underwater caves for over 6 centuries. The approach team, led by a human named Walter and a reformed Rathian named Silas, spent 2 weeks just sitting near the cave entrances. Not trying to communicate, not setting up equipment, just sitting. Being present, being patient. Finally, on the 15th day, a Depths Dweller emerged. Small, barely a meter tall, with features adapted for deep water and darkness. The being studied the approach team for a long time. You are not here to hunt. The Depths Dweller's voice was translated by the sophisticated equipment the team carried. No, Walter said simply. We're here to tell you it's safe now. The hunting has stopped. The laws have changed. You can come up if you want to. Why should we believe you? Because others believed us and they're safe now. The Leviathans. The Cinderwolves, others. They're living in the open, teaching, learning, being part of the galaxy again. The Depths Dweller considered this. The Leviathans live? We thought they were all dead. They were in hiding like you, but not anymore. It took another month of careful contact before the Depths Dwellers agreed to emerge. When they finally did, when they saw the sun for the first time in 600 years, many of them wept. They had forgotten what light looked like. Stories like this repeated across the galaxy. Each discovery, each emergence, each moment when a hidden species decided to trust again. It was slow work, painful work, but it was happening. David stood before the Reformed Council 1 year after the archives were opened. The chamber was more crowded now. Seats had been added for the recovered species. Rover attended via hologram, too large to fit in the physical space. Ash and several other Cinderwolves lay in special areas. The prism wings perched on designated platforms. And representatives from 47 newly discovered species sat in their own sections. 1 year ago, we knew of 6 species declared extinct who were actually in hiding. Today, we have confirmed survivors from 47 species. We have evidence suggesting at least 200 more may exist. David looked around the chamber. This is not just a few isolated cases. This is systematic. The entire structure of how this galaxy has been run for 1,000 years was built on lies. A delegate from one of the newly discovered species stood. Her people had been hiding for 800 years. We lived in fear every day. We taught our children to be silent, to be invisible. We forgot our own history because passing it down was too dangerous. Knowledge was liability. Another delegate stood. My species was declared extinct because we would not give up our territory. It was rich in minerals. Easier to wipe us out and claim the land was empty than to negotiate fairly. One by one, representatives shared their stories, each one unique, each one horrifying, each one proof that the exploitation had been deliberate, systematic, and covered up. When they finished, the chamber sat in heavy silence. What do we do now? Someone finally asked. How do we fix 1,000 years of lies? Rover's hologram spoke, her translated voice filling the chamber. You cannot fix the past. You can only choose a better future. The question is, what will that future look like? The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Some delegates wanted harsh punishments. Others wanted reconciliation. Some pushed for complete restructuring of galactic government. Others preferred reformation of existing systems. Eventually, compromise emerged. The old council would be dissolved completely. A new governing body would be formed, with guaranteed representation for all species, including those newly emerged from hiding. Reparations would be paid to the recovered peoples. Protected territories would be established. And most importantly, a truth commission would be created to investigate every declared extinction in galactic history. It was not perfect. It would not heal all wounds, but it was a start. 5 years after the revelation, David stood in what had become known as the Memorial Gardens. The vast space station orbited no particular world, positioned instead at the calculated center point between all the recovered species' home planets. It had taken 3 years to build and represented something unprecedented in galactic history. a monument not to victory, but to survival. The gardens were divided into sections, each one dedicated to a different recovered species, each one designed to reflect their natural environment. Water tanks for the leviathans, forest groves for the cinderwolves, crystal formations for the prism wings, and at the center a vast wall of names, 643 species, listed in order of when they had been declared extinct. Beside each name a status marker, green for recovered, yellow for possible survivors, red for confirmed extinction. David walked slowly along the wall, reading names. So many were still red, species that truly had been wiped out before anyone could save them, species that had not been as lucky as the leviathans or cinderwolves, species that had not survived long enough to meet humanity. You cannot save them all. Rover's voice came from behind him. The massive leviathan floated in her section of the gardens, watching David with patient eyes. Some losses cannot be undone, I know. It still hurts to see. That is good. Pain reminds us why this matters, why we must not forget. David turned from the wall to face his friend. Over 5 years, his relationship with Rover had deepened in ways he had not expected. She had become an advisor, a teacher, a friend who saw the galaxy with perspectives earned through centuries of hidden observation. The Tribune Commission released their final report yesterday, David said. 412 individuals found guilty of war crimes. 97 species had governments that knowingly participated in exploitation. The financial damages are estimated in the quadrillions of credits. And justice? Rover asked. Can there be justice for crimes of such scale? I don't know. We've tried. Trials have been held. Sentences passed. Money has been paid. Laws have been changed. But can that really balance against centuries of suffering? No, it cannot. Justice is not about balance. Justice is about acknowledgement, about truth, about choosing differently moving forward. Rover shifted slightly. My people will never forget what was done to us. But we are choosing not to let that define us. We are choosing to build instead of burn, to create instead of destroy. That is our justice. A young human woman approached, moving with the careful respect people had learned to show in the memorial gardens. Ambassador Wright? There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. David followed her to one of the meeting spaces. The visitor waiting there was unexpected. High Chancellor Moros, looking even more ancient than when David had last seen him 2 years ago. The old being had been convicted of complicity in the cover-up and sentenced to exile. He should not have been here, Chancellor. I'm surprised to see you. I received special permission to come. There is something you need to know, something I should have told you years ago. Moros's voice was heavy with age and regret. Sit, this will take time. David sat. Moros settled across from him, his movements slow and painful. 500 years ago, when I first learned of the exploitation I investigated, I wanted to understand the full scope. What I found terrified me. Moros pulled out a data crystal. There were not 643 species declared extinct. There were over 2,000. David felt the world tilt. 2,000? The archives you received from the keepers were incomplete. Not intentionally. They only documented what they could observe, but much happened in secret, in places even they could not watch. I found evidence of it all. He pushed the crystal across the table. This contains everything. Every species. Every crime. Every location where survivors might still exist. Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you come forward before? Because I was afraid. Because it would have destroyed what remained of my legacy. Because I am old and weak and selfish. Moros looked away. But I am dying. And I would rather die having done one final useful thing than die comfortable in my shame. David picked up the crystal, feeling its weight. If this is real, if there are really survivors of 1,500 more species out there, then your work has barely begun. And I am sorry. Sorry that this burden falls on you. Sorry that my cowardice made it necessary. Moros stood slowly. I will not ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I simply wanted you to have the truth. All of it. What you do with it is your choice, the old being left without waiting for response. David sat holding the crystal, thinking about the implications. 2,000 species, 1,500 potentially still hidden. The recovery initiative was already stretched thin, trying to reach 47 species. How could they possibly handle this? He took the crystal to Patricia first. She was on Verdun 7. still running the research station that had become the largest Leviathan pod on the planet. Hope, now 5 years old, was nearly as large as her mother. 3 more young ones swam in the nearby waters. Is it real? Patricia asked after reviewing the data. The keeper confirmed it. They've been cross-referencing with their own archives. Moros was telling the truth. 2,000 species declared extinct, evidence suggesting at least 1,500 may have survivors. Patricia sat down heavily. David, we don't have the resources. We don't have the personnel. We don't have time to reach all of them. Some of these hidden populations might not last another decade. I know. So what do we do? David was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. We ask for help. Not just from the Reformed Council. From everyone. We open the recovery initiative to any species, any organization, any individual who wants to help. We train them. We coordinate them. We turn this into a galaxy-wide movement. That's ambitious. So is exposing a 1,000-year conspiracy. So is getting the council to admit genocide. So is building this memorial. We've done impossible things before. We can do it again. Patricia looked at Rover, who had been listening quietly. What do you think? I think humans are foolishly optimistic. I think you attempt things that sensible species would call impossible. I think that is why you succeeded where others failed. Rover's eyes gleamed. I think we should try. The announcement went out 3 days later. The recovery initiative was opening to volunteers from any species. Training programs would be established. Resources would be shared. The goal was simple: find the survivors, protect them, bring them home. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, over 50,000 individuals had applied. Scientists, diplomats, former military personnel looking for redemption. Young people wanting to be part of something important. Representatives from species who had themselves been exploited and wanted to help others avoid that fate. David found himself coordinating the largest volunteer movement in galactic history. Teams were organized by skills and compatibility. Training centers were established on a dozen worlds. The Leviathans offered to teach patience and observation. The Cinderwolves taught tracking and reading subtle signs. The Prism Wings taught communication across language barriers. Each recovered species contributed their knowledge. The first wave of new teams deployed 6 months later. They headed to worlds scattered across the galaxy. Some came back quickly, having confirmed that the species in question truly was extinct. Others took longer, eventually finding survivors who were frightened but willing to listen. One team found a population of beings living inside a star. They had evolved to exist in plasma environments and had been hiding in stellar atmospheres for over a millennium. Another team discovered a species that had gone dormant, burying themselves in ice fields and shutting down their metabolism to avoid detection. A third found a people who had transformed themselves into digital consciousnesses, existing as patterns in ancient computer networks. Each discovery was unique. Each one required different approaches. Each one proved that life found ways to survive even under impossible circumstances. Patricia led several expeditions herself. On a frozen world called Icewind, she found a species that had been living in underground thermal vents for 900 years. They were pale and adapted to darkness, but their culture was rich and complex. They wept when they learned they could finally emerge safely. How many more are out there? One of them asked Patricia through translation software. How many others survived? We don't know yet. But we're looking. We won't stop looking until we find everyone. Why? Why do you care so much about finding us? Patricia thought about how to answer. Because you deserve to exist in the open. Because hiding should not be necessary for survival. Because a galaxy that forces people to disappear is broken and we're trying to fix it. The being studied her. You are human, yes? Your species is young. You have not been in space even 100 years. Why do you care about ancient histories? Because suffering is suffering. Injustice is injustice. It doesn't matter if it happened yesterday or 1,000 years ago. It still matters. Word of that conversation spread. It became something of a rallying cry. It still matters. No matter how old the crime, how long the hiding, how deep the fear, it still mattered. Recovery teams painted the phrase on their ships. Volunteers adopted it as an unofficial motto. David watched the movement grow with amazement and pride. This was bigger than him now. Bigger than humanity. It had become a galactic commitment to confronting difficult truths and choosing to do better. 3 years after the expanded initiative began, The status wall in the memorial gardens told a different story. Of the 2,000 species listed, over 800 now showed green markers. Recovered, safe, emerging into the light after centuries of hiding. 400 were yellow, possible survivors. Teams were searching. Hope remained. Only 800 markers stayed red. True extinctions, species that had not survived long enough to be saved. David stood before the wall with Rover beside him. Hope floated nearby, now nearly as large as her mother, a new generation that had never known the fear of hiding. Do you think we'll find them all? David asked. All the survivors? No, some will choose to stay hidden. Some are too isolated to reach. Some may not exist anymore. Rover paused. But you will find many. You will save many. That is enough, is it? Is it enough when we know there are more out there? It has to be. You cannot save everyone, David. You can only do your best and trust that others will continue the work. Rover's voice was gentle. You have changed the galaxy. You have given hope to thousands of species. You have proven that the strong can choose to protect the weak instead of exploit them. That is a gift beyond measure. David reached out and touched the wall. The names under his hand glowed softly, each one representing lives lived in fear, in hiding, in hope that someday it would be safe to emerge. I received a message yesterday, David said, from a species called the Silent Ones. They